Hello. Have a seat anywhere you like. I'm Jen Bird.
Hi, Chuck Ryan. I'm here now with his friends. It's a pleasure to see you.
Nice to meet you.
I've been Andy Marsh.
Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you.
Heard a lot of that.
Oh.
No, you, I heard your name a lot. But I've never that. Nice to meet you. I live in Idaho.
Oh,
Yeah.
really?
Yeah, third in Virginia.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so I live there.
Virginia myself.
Are you? Nice. Yeah.
What a cool building. That is. All. Because
I mean, no. I just thought of something. Okay. Remember that big round, I don't know if it was a phone or if it was like a. It's like a microphone, it was like round. No, not round, it was like this.
Yeah.
And it looked like a flame saucer kind of. Yeah.
No,
Speakers.
very
Okay, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah.
And I think it's over there, but we could. Okay. Yeah. I just put it in. I thought that was one about it on a speaker phone. Right, but I think the main purpose of bringing in those voices is to fill some of the hesitation. So, what was your experience? Why is Taylor Springs on board with this?
I think the mayor will probably be mostly talking about this. Chime in with it. It's all my thing.
Yes. Yes. So. Yeah. Well, that's on the agenda tonight is the, acceptance of the contract.
Very good, very close.
Yeah, yes, very close, yeah.
It was in the process,
Yeah. It's the inspector, the CH is pronounced like a K, so inspector. That would be this. Yeah. And we're recording, so. He's got 6 years. He's going to be recorded.
Yeah.
You guys really lucked out. It's awesome. He's
And adjust it at all. I really, the difference how you been?
busy.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
They're gonna hire a police chief, and the contract is on it, and then, oh, yes, I know where she said in, on the interview.
Yes. We're very glad he was willing to do that. It's really helped out.
He really did.
I know. Every interaction.
That was a good school. You know, especially, small and big.
Yeah.
And you worry first coming in, shining in, bigger, I guess a part of me worries, maybe these dehumanized folks or something, just getting in line.
Hey, thanks for coming.
It's a cool building.
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
This is the more I look around, the more I appreciate it.
Yeah, and I have to tell you, I had never been in this building. I've been in your old city hall many times, but never this one.
Meaning the old,
Yeah, here on the corner, am I
Oh, actually.
The community center actually was that, yeah, was that the old county building?
Yeah. Yeah. It's okay. You too. Yeah, my pleasure. Happy to be there. Very nice. How are you? How are you?
How are you doing?
Doing all right, how are you?
Good to see you.
Welcome home.
Thank you.
Or anything out in yesterday.
Yeah.
Jake, are you?
Chuck Harmon, very nice experience.
Awesome, Jake Victor, North Point Development.
Oh, okay, good to see you.
Nice to meet you. Pleasure. How are you?
I'm awesome, very good.
Great.
Hi, how you doing? Andy Marsh.
Jake Victor.
How you doing?
How you doing?
I'm the city.
Oh, very cool. Awesome, awesome, welcome.
Yeah.
Really competitive.
Enjoy your summer?
Oh, okay, yes. Rush, I was said Grant. Grant first.
So that makes it like. So I can see what you want. Yeah, it was very, very interesting.
I'd love to hear Randy, Randy's checking the ball like that.
Well, and I agree with them. I said, you look at it, I said, because you will have people that have experience in like labor. That saying, you know, your lead energy efficiency. 6.
Tonight's
gonna be like.
Yeah.
I didn't think the agenda looked. Oh.
Yeah, so.
Well, no, it's.
Yeah.
That's all right. I didn't. You're like, oh, especially like, we can like certain right.
Yeah, we are recording.
Thank you very much.
Yeah.
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 So we're gonna go over
Perfect record.
And that, you know, further, because that's what I would consider. I never show. And I said, oh, it's all right, and I'm still committed. Yeah, I'm still on. You know. Yeah. So I'm saying right here.
I'll see you. I'm not gonna be. No fun stuff.
They've got a number of other,
Are they just on that?
Coffee shop, maybe generate, great. That whole list, I know. Something. I always like to say nice things about each other. But I do, I talk to your wife, so I never the nicest words.
Right, exactly.
And you know.
She's lovely as always.
Where's that man?
So I just went in, to my little wedding.
Oh, no, I don't say, no, she.
Yeah, yeah. So you were. Fun party.
So good time. First day, big one.
Yeah.
Anyway, maybe that rush. Yes, it's a pleasure. Maybe in one down faster, it comes in, it's not come very well. It's very hard to try to work out our business a little bit more.
Sure. So, senior affordable housing project. Yeah, so you. Oh, that's blood brothers. But all I, it always goes.
Yeah.
All along.
Yeah.
But it's not a class, it's not related to one of the line. It's like yours being there. You know, with that, I'm on track. We're gonna put our reason that.
Hi there, Mary.
Survey the process. Sure. Only that at least once a year, there's a lot of years. I think it's probably like I would give some push around. So it's that. I walk there, you know, our senior long. Cause I've heard in some of your houses, it's such a bad house, more than almost still. Yeah. Then.
And our committee.
I've heard about that. The question is, but I know it's too old, so I should write it once and so. Would you do it, run away, and then when we catch up, and then we'll also. So my garage is we did just for that based on it's probably got like we're gonna get top on it and I no I don't know they're important resting on the stage so do for a minute they're on stage. I'm fine, so I feel this good way above the line. So we can still make that high projects, especially for
Well, we have city property that we're purchasing from.
But I don't. I got 3 out of 5 that I can do.
Gotcha. You do have control of.
Yes.
And
That clock is wrong. This is 5:01, so we're not total straight. Mary, do you want to test your sound?
Do you really want to hear me?
Yeah. That is fair. Awesome. Congrats, by the way.
Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate it. He's a cutie pie.
Yes.
Like I said, we're very open to see your, there's a lot of. Hey Rob, how are you? Good, how are you? You are also very slow. Just gotta apologize to you, like. That's okay. Yeah.
Let me introduce myself.
Yeah, you just.
Oh, yes, you're right, you're right. Yeah, it's been a 6-year run. We've got some good stuff done, we've gotten some bad stuff done.
Yeah.
Some good kids, some bastard ideas. I mean, it is. It's important work. It really is important. You know, we get something right, we don't get something right. And the thing about local government is you got real people are really thinking hard and agonizing over this stuff, right?
Somebody has said.
Yeah, well, we take our. I'm gonna sit down. I know what that.
So
know any other site that's very big. Yeah, there's some. Across the street, so I'm there. No, there's a switch, usually I lock it.
No, they're great.
I know. And
Except Mary's
Like, my dad and I have Mary's. Mary's, I've been about this stuff for years.
She's better live.
you guys.
You gotta show us the kid up.
What?
You need to put the grandkid up.
I could probably put up a picture, but, and he's much cuter than I am, so.
He's hours old or something like that.
He actually looks like Rob. He's got that same bald head.
I thought all newborns look like Winston Churchill.
With the cigar in his mouth.
Is Amanda on it, or she's just?
He may not.
Oh, Amanda's gonna be late because she's got a school thing with her seventh grader, so.
Okay.
So just in case you don't know, I'm in Kansas. Here, I'm staying in a short-term rental that's themed like the Wizard of Oz. Here are the red slippers.
Okay.
That's my proof. The Kansas sunflowers.
I saw that, yes, well spotted.
I didn't redecorate my house. I'm really in Kansas. There's no mountains out this window.
Yeah.
That's today's.
Okay, well, we're trying to get a hold of more board. We don't quite have a quorum, but we've got people gathered, so let's go ahead and get started. It is 5:05 p.m. And we've got some guests in the house. So we've got Mayor Chuck Harmon and City Administrator Andy Marsh. We've got George Marlin, Commissioner with the county, Annie Saxon. Go ahead, I'll let you do your title.
Yeah, Amy Saxton, my title is Strategic and Community Planning Division Director. There's way too many words in an anthropology.
That's okay. So, and then we also have Jake Victor. Okay. All right. So why don't did anybody wind up with any questions after you reviewed the materials that we got in the packet? Okay, my notes from our last work session were that we wanted to find out what the zoning recommendations are, which they're in this packet. Staffing shortages here in Georgetown, is there data on that? List of potential projects and examples of other housing authorities. And I'm sure there are other questions that have come up in the meantime, but we had invited folks from the other jurisdictions, a couple of them, just to give some input on how the whole proposal was received with them, what they're excited about, etc. So, why don't I toss it over to you?
Okay, Rich is on his way and John is not gonna be able to make it until 6.
Okay.
So, okay, well, I'm excited about tonight. I know you guys from the county to Idaho Springs, a municipality, are ahead of us in many ways because of circumstances, not allowing us to spend as much time through this. We have been through some really busy seasons with all kinds of other agenda items. However, because of the weight of this discussion, I couldn't think of any better people to be here than to what we see tonight. They have wrestled through these conversations. They have a high, big picture view of this. And I've asked them to come and share from their perspectives of why they see this as a win for the county, specifically for Georgetown. Why is this a win for Georgetown? From the county's perspective to Idaho Springs' perspective. And I don't want to steal any of their thunder points, but I really want them to kind of share how they wrestled through this and how they were able to land that this is not just, I'm in support of this, but we need to do this kind of thing. And I think it's good that we hear these kind of conversations. And so they are graciously here and I'm thrilled that, we can hear from them. So that's where we are.
Okay, board members that are here, are there any questions that we haven't, that my notes didn't touch on that you still wanted to be answered? Just so that we get them up front?
I'd like to hear what they propose and, or what they can share with us, and then I know we'll have more questions after that. I'm ready to ask them if I don't get answers during this presentation.
Okay,
Great, who would like to start?
Hey, I'll go.
Okay,
Yeah, I'm Chuck Harmon, Mayor of Idaho Springs, and I want to thank everybody for giving me the time. Some things I think that you may find interesting about Idaho Springs and how we got here is that we see this as a very community effort, and when I say community, I mean all the municipalities plus unincorporated. And really, I'm speaking for council when I tell you, we're not concerned if most of the units end up being in Empire or Georgetown, or because frankly, 50 units in Georgetown helps out Idaho Springs, and 50 units in Idaho Springs helps out Georgetown.
before you go too much
Yes,
further.
sure.
For video purposes, the camera's cutting you off at the neck.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Take a
Okay,
couple of steps back.
all right, I promise.
right, that's good.
I promise it, the view doesn't get any better, but. Thanks.
Okay, carry on.
Thank you.
And you don't have to stand, if you want to sit down, you know, you're more than welcome.
I say. But, you know, so we're not at all concerned where the units end up. I will share a quick one with you. I don't know how many of you know Al Brown. He is very, community oriented, but particularly with seniors. And Al has 2 very flat acres that happens to adjoin, our historic cemetery. And he was willing to let us buy it, I believe, very much below, a market rate, with the stipulation that it had a deed restriction for affordable senior housing. And we jumped on it, even though the multi-jurisdictional housing authority isn't up and running. But he was ready to retire. He has no qualms if we develop most of the property, and he can stay in his house just as long as he would like. And when he's no longer on the property, we're free to go ahead and develop the rest.
You're right next to a senior, it's a senior retirement facility next to a cemetery.
Yes, and I just wondered if maybe, I know,
Wow, has a good sense of humor.
but I want you to know, because I'm sure this probably crosses people's minds. What if we end up with a disproportional number of seniors that need affordable housing from Empire or from Georgetown? And I mean, the comment I have to make towards that is welcome. This isn't just an Idaho Springs affordable senior living. I think we're probably gonna end up with 80 or more units, and it's for all of our seniors. So, I wanted you to know that that's where we're coming from. I don't know how many of you, had known, of me before I was mayor, but I can tell you, I have never been one that thought, government is the answer. I find the government to be wasteful. I am, have always had what I would call a healthy mistrust of government. And I'm only very positive towards this affordable housing, because frankly, we score higher on grants when we work together as a community. It's something that we all need, and I think we all can participate in, and I think we're just stronger working together than separate. But right now, there are literally hundreds of billions, I'm sure you're aware of this, just in the state of Colorado, there's hundreds of millions. And the Proposition 123 money is just a prime example of money that is out there if we're willing to strive towards a common goal. And I know that, you know, Idaho Springs was probably pretty early on a subscriber to this. Jonathan Kane, our former assistant city administrator, and Amy Saxton had done a remarkable amount of work. And I don't mind telling you, it was extremely good work. And I am very, very thankful, to the effort that they put forward. And, you know, I think we fear change. And this is something very new, you know, we don't have 10 examples in Lakewood for us to point at yet. I think that's coming, but I don't think we need to be in any kind of a position where 5 years from now, we're still talking about it. I believe that in about 3 years, it stands on its own feet and has its own funding. And that isn't a pipe dream, that actually, there's many, many ways to make that happen. And, I will tell you, I can probably hire a marketing person for Idaho Springs for, you know, maybe 60,000-ish. But, I think our council understood, and I certainly understand, we need more of a developer type to make this happen. So, the pay range for that individual is on the higher side, and I'm just being a realist. These would be people that probably ordinarily would be developing things on their own. And that's really who we need. I think, and I want you to know, I don't have anybody in mind, not a single name pops into my head. But I'm certain that for what we're willing to pay, we can get the right person to make this happen, stand on its own 2 feet, and not be any kind of a financial drag on our community. So I do think for the first 2-3 years, it does present a challenge where there's hundreds of millions of dollars at stake in the state. And I would say even for our small community, there are many millions. But I can see the first couple of years us having to support it, but not a blank check. We're not ready to do that.
Any questions for Chuck? For those of you who don't know, Rich Barrows has joined us. He's also on our board. Do you know everybody here?
Yeah.
Okay,
Amy Saxton.
okay.
Yeah, I apologize. My daughter just got scammed on putting a deposit on a room in Dumont. Yeah, so I was cleaning up that mess a little bit, but it was just the deposit. And that wasn't the full deposit, it was just the application fee. So obviously, affordable housing is near and dear to me. I just did.
All right. Thank you, Chuck. Anything?
Maybe I'll share Amy's probably best to actually talk about the process that we went through, because she's the one that's been doing it. But thank you all. I'm George Marlin. I'm the county commissioner out of the Idaho Springs district. You know, I'm gonna try not to go on here. My awareness of the housing problem in Clear Creek County started when I was the manager of the Georgetown Market. I really struggled to find staff. I really worked hard. I begged, borrowed, and tried not to steal employees from other businesses. I spent a lot of time recruiting employees, trying to keep employees, and that includes things like, you know, I think when a lot of my staff was paying a lot for their housing relative to what we were paying. And I ended up providing a lot of support to people to be able to just be fit to stay in their jobs, right? Helping people get to doctor's offices, et cetera. And so that was when I sort of became most painfully aware of the struggles in our housing market. Right around the time I was running for office, the 2018 housing needs assessment came out. And there was a countywide housing needs assessment. It doesn't have Georgetown specific data, but it had some really compelling things that paint a picture of the county's needs. It interviewed the 15 largest employers in the county. Those interviews alone identified about 90 unfilled positions in 2018. I'm guessing that number is higher today. And the report itself says that that's probably 1.5 to 2 times higher because of who they interviewed and the small sample. So you're talking about, I'm not good at math on the fly, but up to 180 unfilled positions in this county. When I think about the chicken and egg conversation here in downtown Georgetown around merchants being closed while customers are here. It's clear to me, having been one of those merchants, that we can do better in supporting them. Housing is at least half of that conversation, childcare being the other. We can talk about that later. So, I came into office thinking, we need to work on housing. And I've spent the last 6 years trying to find those solutions and seeing some swings and some misses. Before I got into office, Bighorn Crossing was a property that the county government purchased, cleaned up, and sold to a market rate developer. I wonder how that conversation would be different and what we'd be hearing differently from the community today had the Clear Creek County government at the time had this housing authority in place to say, now we have a competent partner, a quarterback to really talk about a price amendment for that developer. I say the same thing about when the school district was talking about selling a football field. What we lacked in that conversation wasn't political will around trying to get a price amendment. It was really the ability to point to a quarterback, a person that says, yeah, hey, I know the partners, I know the funding sources, like we can get this done. What I've learned is that that's not me, as smart as I might think I am. That's not a half an FTE in the county government. It's not a division director that's in charge of a whole bunch of stuff. We need a dedicated person, and it's a very specific skill set. So that's kind of how the way that I came to thinking the housing authority is the solution to that was we, a couple of years ago, hired a team to come and take a look at our housing needs assessment that had a myriad of 25 action steps in it, very few of which had been taken. To say, what's an action plan here? What can we do to start to get some progress? And their recommendation was go after a multi-jurisdictional housing authority. I view it as a really great way to not just pool funds, but pool energy, pool intelligence. That board is going to be equal representation. And that director is going to have the skill set we need to start to have real conversations about price amendments when developers are coming into our communities. I am excited to see efforts around tenant advocacy, opportunities around possibly property management, et cetera, become real and become more robust through the housing authority. So those are some of the reasons that a couple of years ago, I was really excited to go down this path, and we got a grant, and Idaho Springs and Clear Creek participated in this grant to sort of bring this proposal to all of our jurisdictions along with those code recommendations. The things that I've had my eye on as we've gotten into the details about the agreement is, how do we make sure this is a high performing organization? How do we make sure that the distribution of funding is fair and equitable? How do I make sure as being responsible for one jurisdiction that this housing authority isn't going to start stomping around and telling me what to do in unincorporated Clear Creek County? Those are some of the kinds of nuts and bolts things that we have looked at and thought through, and that I think are represented reasonably well in this agreement. But I also think that there's space. I'm speaking for myself. I wouldn't be offended to see this agreement change, so that other people can have comfort, other jurisdictions, if it's Georgetown, if it's Silver Plume, if it's Empire. So I'm just really excited. What I think I know, what I have confidence in, is that this multi-jurisdictional housing authority is going to improve outcomes for the constituents of everybody that chooses to participate. And the thing that I also know is that that's not just better for the people of Georgetown. I think it's better for the community as a whole if Georgetown chooses to have a seat at that table. So happy to answer any questions, or I think it would be great to get to Amy, kind of talk about kind of the nuts and bolts of how we went through the process of building this, if you guys are interested.
Okay. Any questions for George before we move to Amy? Okay.
Thanks, George.
Great, thank you. I'll just, yeah.
Do you want to see that space?
I'll just put it
You're able to use this.
I think this will work. So, thank you. Again, my name is Amy Saxton. For those of you who don't know me, George mentioned I'm the division director at the county. My responsibilities include the planning and building group. Which is where I got to know Lynette. And I'm responsible for the housing department. I also, lead the trails and open space department, and I represent the county on issues related to I-70. So I kind of have circus music playing in my head all the time. I'm gonna talk just a little bit, I wanna build on what George talked about how we got here. We did try to make the 2018 needs assessment something that was actionable, so we could identify a strategic plan, and that really pointed to the need to pool resources. That's something if any of you have seen our video, you heard Lynette comment on that in that video that we made for this project. Pooling resources and being able to concentrate and have that quarterback that George mentioned to lead these projects is really critical. I think the values that George and Chuck talked about, elevating this community, strengthening the community with housing as the foundation is really a critical thing. One of the things that I've had the opportunity to do is sit in these rooms for all of the communities, because that's been one of the things I've done. I've spoken to Empire and Silver Plume, I've been in this room, I've talked to the Idaho Springs Council and presented to the BOCC, of course, about this. And that's given, I've heard what the concerns are from all the different communities and everybody has different concerns, and a lot of it really comes down to value. What is the value of the MJHA? What are they going to get? How can the MJHA deliver value to each different entity? And that is an important concern. And that is going to be a challenge for the executive director, whomever is hired in that role, to make sure that the MJHA serves all the diverse needs of the community. And couple points I want to make. Several people have talked about the value proposition from the perspective of the limited amounts of land that we have available. There's only so many housing, there's only so many places to build. Everybody could probably count them on their existing digits, right? There's only so many. And that's relevant, and that's important to keep in mind. However, that means a couple things. One, it's really important to get them right and to have that quarterback and make sure that the process for those limited opportunities meet the need, that they really are on target. So that's one reason to consider really utilizing our resources well. But another important thing to consider with the MJHA is that it's not just about building new housing. First of all, building new housing is hard. It takes a long time. That's not going to be the first things that does MJHA delivers to this community. Resident services is a really, really important thing that this entity can deliver. Connecting people with resources that are meaningful to that community. For Georgetown, that might be historic preservation grants, opportunities to elevate the quality of existing housing. One of the things that the Clear Path Home Project included was a zoning code review. You're somewhat familiar with that perhaps. Each entity got a review of their zoning code to see how well it was supporting that community's housing goals. And the one thing that every single community identified as a housing goal was to maintain the quality of their existing homes. And that is something that I would imagine every community struggles to find capacity for and struggles to actually do. How do you do that? How do you make sure people can connect with the resources that are out there for renovation, for weatherization programs, for historic preservation grants? And that's an ideal project for an MJHA to offer coordination and collaboration and really help coordinate on that and deliver value for that. And even if that was all that was delivered, I feel like that would be a big value for Georgetown, to have a resource to make sure that the historic preservation of the homes in this community, in many ways above all of the communities, have so much value to the identity and culture of this town, that is something that could be of real value to the community of Georgetown. And so I think there's real opportunities for each community to develop a custom set of value from the MJHA and make sure that those programs are delivered. So those are a couple points. One, the housing work that gets done does need to be done perfectly as we can, because we have so few shots. Two, an important goal to every single community is to maintain the quality of our existing homes, and that's something that the MJHA can offer meaningful benefit to. And so then that was 1, 2, and there was 3. I had it. The next steps, the how we are actually going to make this work. So we've been through this review process to try to develop the kind of cliff notes for what are in this IGA. What's the term? How much is it going to cost? How do we function as a team? How do we form this entity? And that's important, and that's what the draft that you have in front of you lays out. But then what? Once we form this entity, how might things work from there? And forming that board is really then the team that will be the functioning entity that Georgetown would have a seat at. And this MJHA creates a brand new table in Clear Creek County, brand new table for each community to sit at and discuss housing concerns together with a representative from each community together equally to discuss it together and make sure that their concerns are represented. And that table is a new table. And that is a really important thing to keep in mind as well, that signing this IGA creates a brand new table. That is a clean slate table that you can decide what the fabric design is of that tablecloth. You can choose the color, you can figure out what you want to be at that table and make it how you want it to be. And that board will design the mission and vision and create a specific business plan. We know we want the MJHA to advance affordable housing, but what are the priorities? What are the priority tactics for that strategic goal? We know we want the MJHA to provide resident services, but what are the priority tactics for advancing that goal?
Aren't there examples of good, of this success somewhere else in the country, and isn't that couldn't that act as a model? I mean, obviously not, word for word, but take the good with the bad, and
Well, we have done that. We use the Fraser Valley
Okay.
IGA as the template for our agreement and worked with that as our first draft, and then edited from there to make sure it represented this community. And the statutory template also exists in terms of what an MJHA's authorities that sort of come with that, the technical definition of what an MJHA, of what a multi-jurisdictional housing authority is.
And they're a great example because they've got a ski area right nearby. Has that really helped their employment in, when?
Now that I do not know.
Oh, okay.
I don't have that data. It's a relatively new MJHA.
But I would imagine one would beget the other.
Yeah, yep. But that would be good to know.
I have a questioning, really bright about the value and to the historic district. Would this entity be able to, would that be a funding stream applying for historic grants to help upgrade and renovate some of the property or
The MJHA could certainly apply for grants. They could also add capacity to support Georgetown being the lead agency on grants. That would be a strategic decision based on the particular grant program and the source of the funding and what made the most sense for how that program could be used.
Interesting, because that's funding streams into the future. I worked in the 90s with the housing authority for after school care, for child care, and administration changed. $300,000 went away.
Wow.
And so we had to lay off like 5 or 6 people, and so did the south side childcare in
Yeah.
Pueblo. And so, yeah, there's all kinds of funding now, but into the future, it's pretty hard to predict depending on administrations.
True. And grants are an important source of funding for the long term. One of the first tasks of the board would be also, in addition to advancing affordable housing and providing resident services, the third leg of the MJHA stool is to identify revenue streams. And one of the things that the team has talked about is potentially providing property management services. That could look like providing managing the lease agreements on rental properties for that service, and that would be a fee-based service that would generate revenue, and would also provide jobs. There are a lot of challenges with that. That would not be as simple, that would be a heavy lift. There'd be some challenges with that, but it would put the MJHA and that staff group kind of on the ground in direct relations with residents and mitigating that owner and tenant relationship, and there would be community members. There's some reasons why that could work. I think that's important, and I think Chuck is in the right mindset to think about trying to get the MJHA to be in a position where it's
Funds itself.
However, my message to every board I've spoken to about this is not to hang their hat on that hook, and to be thinking that this is a permanent funding commitment. And that the MJHA should at the same time be striving to develop sustainable funding, but that this is a long-term investment in housing, and it's almost like a staff person. You know, you're funding a department, you're deciding to fund this department. We, all the communities in Clear Creek County, are collectively trying to fund a department. We're creating a board to lead that department, and it's in service to all of us. And that is a way to think about it. But my suggestion, my encouragement is to think of it as a permanent funding commitment, and also encourage the MJHA to develop self-sustaining systems. And then that permanent funding commitment could go into developing a fund balance so that the MJHA was positioned to grant matches, to do things like that. One of the other things that the MJHA is able to do is with voter authorization. Do taxing authority, and so that could be finding the right type of fee to bring to the voters. And that's another reason why the idea of providing meaningful resident services and building political goodwill and creating some political capital is
People that vote.
yeah,
Actually,
absolutely. And so the MJHA is like a front counter for everybody, so that there's someplace to go to ask to go. There's a face to go and visit and say, I need help with this problem, and hopefully they get that help.
I mean, something from homelessness to like renovating an existing to finding a, brand new.
First time home buyer programs,
Perfect.
landlord tenant disputes, all of the things that our residents struggle with, that the MJHA would be that front counter, would be that meaningful resource for people. And it would be a place people could go for help, and they would get it, and it would, one of the things I really believe is that this could improve the reputation of government, could help people see government as providing meaningful services to people and help move that needle a little bit. And, that's one of the things that we all need to be thinking about, is how to get people to vote yes on those ballot measures and believe that paying taxes into government is not just flushing money down the toilet, that it's actually an investment in progress. If we do this right, the MJJ could be something that this
It
community
may not help
sees
you,
as
but
a-
it'll help your neighbor.
Yeah,
That's the
Yeah.
whole idea behind this.
absolutely.
I don't know about you, but I mean, I thought that this was, we were elected. That we have a constituency. I think it's just, it'll absolutely show that we are interested in, bolstering our community.
Yeah,
You can't imagine, quite frankly, it's irresponsible not to.
Can I add the private developer's perspective on this whole conversation? Sure. If you don't mind, Amy.
absolutely.
So that's cool, okay.
Yeah.
I know, you look better, but I got this.
Yeah, North Point Development,
That's
we're
right.
for laws and governors, this is it. Quite frankly, affordable housing just doesn't get built without these entities existing. There are about 2 large funding sources in the state of Colorado. That go towards funding affordable housing. And that's the tax credit program and the newly created Proposition 123 program. A rural community or a rural county like Clear Creek County is not getting an affordable housing project without a partnership with the multi-jurisdictional housing authority. It is not happening. And the reason is, that partnership provides the property with property tax exemption, sales and use tax exemption, which is a huge part of being able to deliver such a large discount to market rents.
Now, does that entity then have the ability to secure grants that would also help with the funding of?
Absolutely, yeah, so that's kind of my point. The partnership with the multi-jurisdictional housing authority, when I go submit an application to CHAPA for tax credits, like we were kind of talking about with Kirksland, they're not approving that application unless I have a housing authority involved in the project.
Because they know that there's some funding behind it.
Because they know there's some funding behind that. They know that their dollars go further when I partner with the housing authority, get property tax exemption, and am able to access other types of funding.
You're the grease on the skids.
Exactly. It's actually what gets these projects done. So our last project was in Brush, Colorado, where Rick comes from, and that was a partnership with the Brush Housing Authority. And without that partnership, quite frankly, there is no shot that project would have happened. Rural communities have much lower rents. I mean, Georgetown's a little different in that nature, but they're way harder. Higher construction costs, they're way harder to get these projects to pencil in. So this is kind of a must if we're gonna, or any affordable housing developer is gonna try to do something in the county. And to the point about values earlier, the state's only funding probably one affordable housing project every 4,
Yeah,
5,
Chuck said there was
6 years. Huh?
Chuck said there was millions.
There is one affordable housing project in the tax credit space every couple of years. And if you don't view this as a collaborative process as a county, you're gonna end up in a position where you're fighting against each other, and the multi-jurisdictional housing authority kind of puts you in a position to all come to one table and have that conversation and game plan and strategize as to how you're gonna kind of achieve all these different communities' objectives.
Do usually these multi-jurisdictional housing authorities have like a sole person who just writes grants?
There's usually an executive director, yeah,
Oh, that comes out.
plus staff, plus additional staff. And I guess the other thing I'll mention is these partnerships are not always free to develop.
Cause that's the.
So that involves, providing the housing authority with some percentage of cash flow, or providing them with some percentage of our developer fee for providing that partnership and being involved in the project. So that's also another potential future cash flow source for the entity, so.
Yeah.
Really important conversation, really excited to hear the county talking about that.
There was something that came up that, and then you know about this, of course, because you brought it up. Rich, I think it was you asked about historic preservation. You'll see in the draft that's in your packet, has changed in the last week to explicitly include housing preservation. It was already always kind of in there, like regularly, it's just been there. But now it explicitly states that is a possibility, because Lynette had said in the mayors and commissioners meeting that, this is a value and it's something that I'd like to see be explicit. So there's a nice recital about it in the new agreement, as well as explicit mention of housing preservation. Because, there are a lot of homeowners in Georgetown that are doing a great job keeping their houses up in the historic district. And I think there are some homeowners and some renters that could use some support. And I think that this organization can fill in that gap as well.
I think for Georgetown, that we're gonna find more value there than doing any buildings because of the lack of buildable space. So that I appreciate you answering that question.
That was exactly what that's point.
And at Empire and Silverthorne, I think similarly, particularly similar, I was at their meeting last night.
But it doesn't, folks that work at Georgetown Market, if they only have to drive from Idaho Springs. That still helps provide housing to folks in the county. To,
Absolutely, sure.
and for jobs throughout the county.
Well, the other thing too is, I don't know what it is, but Idaho Springs is the limit that people from down in Denver will come to. If you say that you're in Idaho Springs, oh yeah, we'll come up, no problem.
Right.
The minute you say you're from like Richmond or Downeyville, or even, you know,
Yeah.
Georgetown, immediately it's, oh,
Too far.
wow, whoa. So I mean, having enough housing in the area so that you can house people who are plumbers and electricians and people who are necessary to, you know, so that you don't have to call down to Golden or Thornton.
Right.
To get somebody.
Right, so our community can grow organically and authentically.
I mean, that's really what
In a way that increases our school class sizes and, you know, really lets it grow in a way that is meaningful and not in a junk food kind
But
of.
if you do make a low income housing project with a daycare center in the basement.
If the funding's available, yes.
Just saying.
One of the stunning stats from the housing needs assessment is around 70% of the people who work here at jobs located in Clear Creek County are coming into the metro area, 2 years late. I didn't have anybody coming from the metro area to the Georgetown market, and I think that's one of the, I'm curious if you agree, Chuck, I think that's one of the reasons why we see people able to get employees in downtown Idaho Springs and not necessarily on 6th Street, Georgetown. That extra 10 miles makes a difference.
What is it,
Yeah.
Baselli, Jim Baselli at Wilson McDonald's, that guy's amazing. He's got J1s and working in there, that's fantastic.
Honestly, I've never seen anything like it.
Yeah,
Consistent.
good for him. Yeah, but look what he's had to do, for God's sakes,
Right.
right?
Do you, Amy or George, wanna speak to the services that have been provided over the last several years by Sally Rush? And she is now retired, and so we're also trying to fill that gap, and there've been a lot of Georgetown folks that have benefited from her help
Yes.
directly.
Well, she did retire in July.
Mhm.
And she provided a lot of resident services and held classes, and we do expect a good portion of that work to be covered by the MJHA. We will be moving some of those, we'll be training our Health and Human Services Office to cover some of that work as well. And, you know, one of the things George and I talked about a little bit before this meeting was just if we discover that the amount of work that is needed from this one ED, that there's more, that when this board is formed and we start hearing from each of the communities about what is actually needed and the amount of resident services starts to grow, we may find that the budget we have identified for this organization is not quite enough. But that's our vision right now, is that Sally's work could get absorbed and covered by this, and that there's a benefit to having it in one place, having one person that's covering the whole service in a unified and consistent way.
So that's probably a good segue to making, to appoint an executive director. If it not be you,
That, would not be me.
okay, I'm just saying, I don't wanna step on anybody's toes.
That's
You're not gonna-
that's the plan.
Dodge that string.
But I'm just saying, I know,
But no, that's would be one of the first tasks of the board, once it's formed, to do that strategic and business planning work and really nail down the responsibilities of the MJHA. And to then search for and hire an executive director.
Gotcha.
Okay. I wanna make sure that we give Jake some time, because he's here to talk to us too. But any questions from the board that have come up or haven't been answered, or?
Can I ask a question? I'll just ask one at this point.
Okay.
Right now, I know that ultimately we're going to be asked for funding to support this and to get it, the startup. But what is the projected cost per year when we talk about creating this housing authority and funding it through some type of tax what is that projected to be?
So, Mary, right now, Georgetown's contribution, I believe, is 30, thank you, George, 37,000 annually for the first 3 years. And there's a fair amount of information providing context for that in the draft IGA and the exhibits that gives you some context for how that number was arrived at, what the different, models we used that were compiled and combined to arrive at that number. And so that 37,000 is 18% of the total. And that is a contribution to a budget of 200,000 that's the total annual budget for the MJHA based on just an ED for staff. And after 3 years, the budget would be, the agreement would reset, and the variable contribution would be reevaluated. And that means we would look again and look at what were the services delivered to each organization, each entity, how much value was delivered, how many residents were served, were there any actual housing projects that were delivered in that 3-year time period, how many units were there, and also what is each entity's ability to pay, because that is also a consideration in how this original funding model was developed. Ability to pay, this is a combination of population and job distribution. So those are the 3 main entities that were used to create this funding model. When we recalculate in 3 years, we'll add in the value that was delivered to each entity, and we'll recalculate how this funding model will be divided.
And I understand that would be Georgetown's contribution. I'm saying if this housing authority ends up being a tax base, when we look at the fire authority, there's a separate, tax option for that. And so ultimately, this housing authority needs to stand on its own somehow without the direct contributions of each municipality. And what is that cost going to be? And I personally find it difficult to accept that for $100,000 over the next 3 years, you're saying that we're going to be providing weatherization opportunities for our residents in existing housing, and there is no affordable housing going to be built when we know that there's a need for affordable housing, and ultimately that's our goal. And so these resident services are great, but the actual service that's needed is housing. And to me, I can't wholeheartedly support $100,000 for weatherization when I have 10 families that perhaps need housing. And I'm concerned that the housing, when it's not distributed equally or not distributed in Georgetown, then that affects our schools, and there's the ripple effect. So you've got a great big program proposal, and it sounds wonderful, but let's scale it back to Clear Creek too.
Right, so I mean, I think the way to think about it is for the investment, for the MJHA's budget of $200,000 a year that everybody contributes to, for that is where that investment provides the resource to access all of the different funding sources that are out there. That helps provide the resource that connects people to the weatherization resources that are out there. That doesn't provide the weatherization program money. That helps connect people to it, because there's a whole bunch of money in weatherization programs that are out there that we just aren't connecting people to because we don't have the resources to connect people to them. There's money on the table that we aren't able to connect people to. And so in this case, what this would do and what we're suggesting and what we are asking is that each community is willing to invest. And yes, in this case, Mary, you're right. It would be $100,000 over 3 years. That Georgetown says that's a worthwhile investment, that we're gonna be willing to put that money out there and say, okay, we don't know for sure what we're gonna get for that, but we want to say that we wanna connect people with resources, we wanna do more than we're doing now. We wanna say that we wanna make that investment in housing to connect people with resources, to seek grants, to be available to developers, to make sure that the development opportunities that we do get are done right. That's what that's what you've been spending your $100,000 on.
Maybe is it fair to add to that, that I don't hear you saying getting price commitments on housing that's built is not a goal. What I hear you saying is that those projects are difficult to
Oh, yeah.
build and come across, and that there's no promise that in
Yes,
the first 3 years something will be built. It's not the goal not to.
right, it's certainly not the goal not to, right.
It's the goal to do that.
It's definitely the goal to do that. It is something that is difficult, and I think it's also important to recognize that there's a great deal of value in providing resident services and establishing the value of this organization, and that is also a win. And I think that's just a message that I just really want everybody in this room to understand, and that it has to be, that I feel like is a high value benefit to deliver it as well.
It also
But you
allows
may-
developers, sorry, it also allows developers like us to have interest in Clear Creek County and have interest in these different communities, because if this entity is not here, myself and most other developers, we can't get new affordable housing projects to pencil. So we'll go look at other communities that do have an MGHS. So the establishment of that is certainly, from my perspective, necessary to allow us to even look at doing affordable housing.
But so the priority should be the housing and the services come later. I find it difficult to support the housing authority when one of your focus points is looking at possibly property management of short-term rentals, when we know that short-term rentals and affordable housing are not in the same species whatsoever. And, you know, that's a great thing to think about down the line when we can staff it and money's rolling in, and yes, I can see that there's, you know, some income revenue for that, but that's a hard sell when we're trying to say we need affordable housing. Oh, but the housing authority is going to be property managers for the short-term rentals, because we all know, and we've all sat at the tables when the different areas have pushed back on what our short-term rental issues are. So I would like us focused more on the housing aspect than the extra services, because I think then they'll fall into place. And if we're providing so many services for potential people that we can't even house, then are we attracting a whole different issue?
I think that's a great set of points, and I think that's the exact type of conversation that the board, when formed, will have about how to focus the MJHA. And that, I'm encouraged by that conversation. It sounds to me, Mary, that you're ready to, you've already joined the MJHA, like you're in. And that's what a strategic conversation is going to be about. What is the focus? How do what is the priority? If there's a list of 2 things, resident services and advancing affordable housing. Yeah, it sounds like if you were sitting on that board, you would say, let's focus solely on prioritizing affordable housing. And that is what the board formation conversation would be about, is prioritizing the business plan and strategic goals of the organization to make sure it's meeting the community's needs. That is exactly what the formation, once the IGA is signed and we agree that this pooled resources, what is needed, that's what we have the conversation that you started right now.
So what you're doing is just offering me another opportunity when I'm termed out in this particular board role, that there will be another opening somewhere else that I can join in. Thank you. Future, I like future plans.
Any other questions from the board? Thank you all so much, and thank you, Jake, for contributing from a different perspective. I wanted to, before we have to close this up, the work session out, I wanted to give you an opportunity to address us.
Are we doing that as part of the work session, or? Sure, absolutely.
Please. Good night.
So in front of you, you have a one pager on some property that the town owns off Argentine. Rick, if you wanna kinda give the introduction.
Yeah, so I'll go ahead and start. Jake and I have done a development together in Brush, Colorado. And it was one of these hot topics even back then. And within the county, he had met with multiple jurisdictions, and I think Brush was the one who saw the possibility of what this can become, because we had a Brush Housing Authority. And we partnered together and was able to do an incredible project that I never got to see.
Yeah, come on, it's done.
So I laid the groundwork and then I came to Georgetown. However, Jake has come before this board before and talked to us about an opportunity with Proposition 123. If we can do the land bank program, if we can go after a grant with purchase funds from that in order to go after. It was exciting, however, it didn't happen.
That's on Kurt's property.
Yeah, that was Kurt's property, the 4-acre, 5-acre site. However, that happens a lot, where we have great dreams, but you're not able to grab hold of those dreams. Jake has drove with me multiple times all throughout town, and he has consistently come back at one piece of property, and which is, he even brought it back up to me recently and said, what about this one? And I said, I think it's a great possibility, but the board would have to know what this is and how fitting the conversation to talk about multi-jurisdictional housing authority with a property developer like Jake, because this would not happen without that entity. At the same time, he would have to work with the town with having town property. So it's the same concept. Before, what we were gonna do is buy the property, and then the partnership was give the property to him so that we can guarantee an affordable housing project development. In this situation, we already own the property, so we wouldn't have to go after getting this property. We have it, but he is wanting to share what his thoughts are if we were to partner with him for a project like this. So is that teed up? Good?
That's perfect. So to backtrack for a second from the presentation that you all just heard, the county is right now in a very, very strong position to get affordable housing built. And to compete for housing tax credits from the Colorado Housing Finance Authority, be it Georgetown, Idaho Springs, anywhere in the county. The last time that affordable housing was built in Clear Creek County was at Brush, Idaho Springs. When was that built? 2017, I wanna say, so it's 2024, so enough time has passed where we can now go to the state and say, hey, we wanna secure additional funding for a new affordable housing development. I was very excited, as were, I think you all, about doing affordable housing on the Kirk property. That's not moving forward at this time. It sounds like that's going to be fully developed by that group. So Rick and I have been talking about finding other opportunities in Georgetown and other opportunities in Clear Creek County in general for the next affordable housing project. What SHAFA really cares about is, access to amenities, walking distance to some amenities, especially in a rural community. So Argentine, kind of a perfect spot for a new affordable housing development. We're looking at doing 45 units, which is kind of their sweet spot for their 9% housing tax credit program. We're interested in doing 1, 2s, maybe 3 bedroom units. You can kind of see some photos on the bottom left of that handout of, recent projects that we've done. I don't think I brought anything like that. It was more of just a conversation. That property would be deed, or any property that we build on would be deed restricted to be affordable for 30 years under a land use restriction agreement. So deed restricted. The town would not be transferring the property until we're actually closing on the development, which means we have your permits in hand. We are ready to go, fully committed on building, 30 to 80% AMI affordable housing. So I really do like that property. I believe it's currently the event parking lot. I think there were some conversations or insight that Rick had around some maybe potential concerns. I don't know where he escaped to, probably that. So this project would be all electric, net zero energy. It would be the first affordable housing development here in Georgetown, that's actually considered affordable. It would be the second, in Clear Creek County, which is very exciting. Like I said, it would have 30 to 80% of Clear Creek County median income. We would be looking for a partnership with the multi-jurisdictional regional housing authority, as part of that development, to provide property tax exemption. That would be a very important element of moving our project forward.
Your flagship project.
And I think it would address some of the concerns that, you know, we just heard around really focusing on affordable housing from day one with that new group. So with that, that's kind of, you know, the gist of what we're looking at, what we've been talking about for a while. Open it up to any questions or conversation and kind of hear from you all on thoughts.
Way to sweeten the pot.
Yeah.
I honestly didn't know this meeting was happening. I called her last week. I'm like, we can touch base.
Oh, I thought
with your council.
I thought you guys like to fight.
I mean, that was a secret, however.
Thinking you guys are next level. Sorry. No, but is there any way, like, if, you know, push came to shove, we could like visit that brush project just to see?
Absolutely,
What
absolutely, yeah, it's beautiful.
Okay,
If you would like to make the drive to Brush, more than welcome to.
what is it, like 3
Yes,
days?
sir. I'm pretty good drive from here. Absolutely, but as a company, we have, you know, about 2,200 units of affordable housing that we've built. Happy to share, you know, additional brochures and information on all of those.
Yeah.
Just so you can see kind of our portfolio, but, we've been around for about 15 years. I skipped over some of this background because we've gone through it in the past.
So from us, you would need a letter of intent.
So in order to apply, to CHAPA, applications are due in February. Rick and I just went through kind of what the process would look like. We would need a commitment from, you all to donate the property for affordable housing, once again, with the contingency that we wouldn't actually close and have ownership over the property until, we have a full commitment from CHAPA and we're able to break ground. We would be going to a plan commission for the, special use permit. There's language in your code that permits you to, permits us to build multifamily housing, in the commercial district, as long as it's town-owned land. Then the third piece would be, you know, asking for, the Board of Adjustments to give us a variance to parking. We would, you know, explore exactly, is a 1.5 to 1 parking stall per unit what we need, or, you know, do we need any adjustments there? So that's kind of what the process would look like. It's super helpful, like I said, that the county did a housing needs assessment in 2018 that boosted the case significantly. We are right now looking at making this a family development. Like I said, 30 to 80% of county median income.
Okay.
Do you usually, before you do a project like this, do some community meetings? So that way,
Absolutely.
the community would get a chance to see what you're gonna do, hear about it,
Absolutely.
provide input.
Absolutely. Yeah, and I think we've talked about in the past, I think our goal is to start this process sooner rather than later, so that we can get in front of the neighbors, we can get in front of the community, start having these conversations with them. And making sure that they understand what you all are working on with us and are excited about it.
Very good.
Okay.
But I think something important to consider is, you know, as a county, I think everyone needs to be on the same board as, you know. We can't be working on a couple different CHAPA projects at once. I think the county needs to commit to, you know, this is our next project if we're gonna move this forward. A partnership with the multi-jurisdictional housing authority, and I think that's an important part of the process as well. If CHAPA sees a couple different applications coming from the county, it's gonna be a bad look for the county, so.
Okay. All right. Questions, Mary? Okay, anybody here? Okay, very good, thank you, and I'd like to see us pursue this. I think the rest of the board does also. Okay,
Perfect. Good, thank you.
thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Yes,
Yeah,
thanks very
thanks
much.
for
Okay. So that's at the end of our work session. It is 6:08 PM.